It's getting to be kind of that time of the year, kind of right before start hearing all the E3 talk. You know, we're already kind of planning some E3 stuff. But, you know, like I haven't gone and seen E3 stuff or anything like that, and I think that's going to all happen and all that. But yeah, kind of a quiet period. It should be a good show this year. It kind of has to be, right? You know, the hardware stuff's out of the way, so it's just sort of like bang, 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 games, you'd think. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I know about a couple of things that are getting announced in E3 I'm actually pretty excited about. So that's that, I guess. I don't know. But will there be like a bulk, a grip, stack of new stuff? Yeah, probably. One with it, right? New consoles are done. There are no games, right? Oh, anyway, I'm just kind of getting over the last, I'm still sniffling. I'm starting to think this is allergies at this point. But I got a head full coming out of PAX. Rough week. Started pretty rough before our family happened. Kind of got sick flying on the flight back, started feeling a little off. Sure enough, the next night, I was all crapped up, so. Still kind of sniffly, but yeah, I feel fine now. It's just, now that I'm sniffly and I feel fine, I'm not sure if it's the remnants of the head cold, or it's just like, spring has sprung in these parts, like, the pear trees out this back window here are kind of blue. It's just an allergy thing. I hear the allergies are just straight off the charts this year. That's what everyone says every year. Had a good time at PAX. Got some stuff now. Panels. It was a good split. You know, went to NYU and talked to the folks there. Came to that event and a lot of questions and stuff like that. Talked a lot about what we do, why we do it, sort of stuff. The nuts and bolts of this line of work. And then went to PAX and was involved in bottles getting broken over people's heads and some other stuff. So it was a good, I think, kind of represented the two weird halves of whatever it is that I do. It was a good time. Above all, it was a good time. We made some cool stuff. That video of me talking to NYU's up on the site. It's on Vimeo. It's on NYU's channel. But I embedded the video in a news story. So if you haven't seen that yet, go get a look. It's interesting. People seem to like it, I guess. I had a good time. And then the PAX panel, of course, is up if you haven't seen that. And then you'll have to go to YouTube if you want to see the Royal Rumble panel. And then Pat Bear's panel that I was on with Pope next. And also something that happened to that. Printed out on Twitch archives or something. Yeah. So I'm taking a lot of questions all over the place. Out in Brooklyn, Boston. A little bit on Tumblr here and there. I'm not really spending a ton of time there these days. You know, try to check in on it like you. I've got some free time. Very exciting. Yeah. And then I pulled all your questions from Comic Vine. That's where you want to send me. Go to Comic Vine, send me a PM. My username there is Jeff, just like it is with my mom. It's the same. And I'll pull your questions every so often. You know, it's harder to do these. It's weird, you know. It's like originally this was kind of the only place I was answering questions, so I got a lot more questions, and I started doing stuff on Tumblr, and then fewer questions started coming here. And it's a whole mess. So it's harder to do these as frequently because questions don't come in as hot and heavy. So if you've got questions, feel free to send them in here. You know, I check it pretty regularly. It's just, you know, I want to make sure that I've got a bunch of questions before I sit down and answer them. Double fist. Chase the Diet Pepsi with some water. Let's see here. So, a lot of long questions this time. You know, I get it. You want to frame your question appropriately and all that stuff. But, let's see what we got here. Physicalos says, what are your feelings specifically about the game Myst? I remember you making a couple of comments about not really liking it. Do you like point-and-click adventure games in general? I like Myst because that's the most inventive puzzle design of any adventure game. The atmosphere was amazing for a really nice computer game. It wasn't just a slideshow. It was the first version of a game like King's Quest or Monkey Island. The character's story, where all the history you were discovering you explored. You discover one of the main characters fighting a drug addiction. Stories told many discoveries like that. It was like Gone Home. Truly, Myst was an amazing game for the time. Myst was refreshing. Sit down with that game if you get a chance. I think you might enjoy it. So, Myst is actually why I understand why people have a negative reaction to Gone Home. And I don't agree with it, that reaction to Gone Home. But I understand, because when Myst came out, it seemed like an assault on video games. Myst was everywhere. Everyone was talking about Myst. You know, you were seeing stories, because it was selling so well. And most people were playing it. It was kind of the first casual game in a lot of ways, too. By being kind of a multimedia CD-ROM game for PCs. You know, it was a lot of games, like dads were playing Myst, and, you know, like businessmen were playing Myst, and people that didn't know video games were getting into Myst and talking about Myst, and everywhere you looked, it was Myst, and it was the stories, you know, mainstream news talking a little bit about Myst, and how popular it was, and oh, it's so incredible. And I played Myst and said, what the fuck's a fucking, it is a fucking slideshow. It's a bunch of strung together video clips of you walking around this dumb fucking island. Like, yeah, and Myst felt like a problem. It was one of those things where, because it was so popular, we were like, well, I don't like this. I like games this way. And Myst seems like if it's getting all this attention, all this popular, like it's gonna fuck things up. And it did for a while. well, it didn't fuck things up. I mean, people kept making traditional games, but, like, multimedia happened after that, and everyone made their dumb CD-ROM games, and we had, Dennis Hopper in his game, David Bowie, it's like all the shitty FMV games that it's fun to make fun of now came out of that era. And, Rebel Assault came out of that. That game was shit. A lot of bad got done around that. I think things are different now. The game industry is in a very different place, and you have so many different directions to go in when making a game that, a game that did what Myst did now wouldn't necessarily cause that big sea change, or that big feeling of like, oh, we're moving games in this direction now, and this is where the money is, and you wouldn't necessarily have that in that sense. I mean, that happens more around platforms now. Like that's why phone games are so big, is because some people made some money there, and everyone went like, we got to do that. So everyone sunk a bunch of effort into making games on phones. And it sort of happens that way now. But, Gone Home's not a threat. Gone Home's actually, I think it's like a beautiful thing. It's really cool. And I think the argument is kind of silly now. When I look back on it now, because gaming has changed, and certainly my perspective on it has grown over the 20 years, whatever, however long it's been, 20 years, I guess, since Myst was big. Gone Home's incredible. It's a really unique thing. It doesn't mean that you have to love it. Not every game is for everyone. That's fine. But
I travel about collecting rare stones.
I don't intend to sit down and play Myst. I played Myst. I don't like Myst. It's just not for me. Probably never will be. Whether that's baggage from back then, sticking with me, or just, I still just don't. Even that real Myst thing that was all full motion, I do like adventure games. I do like point-and-click adventure games, but not like that. Not first person like that.
Now you have extras if you can pay.
Some of these questions are a little old. Galactic Gravy writes in and says, hey, I've been having fun with the Titanfall beta. So, I don't know. But playing it reminded me of a couple years ago playing the Red Faction Guerrilla demo, and then it reminded me of a decade ago playing the UT 2004 demo. These were called demos, but Titanfall is a beta. I understand that the use of these trial periods, like testing servers, getting player feedback, and working out kinks, but I wonder if Red Faction and UT 2004 use their demos for the same purposes. I'm not asking if Titanfall should be a demo, but rather should those other games be classified as beta, but the terminology has just changed. I suppose it's because a beta means unfinished, and a demo means a tiny chunk of the finished game, so there's less inferred to the final product. So am I right in thinking that those games were also using a demo period as beta, and the acceptable terminology has changed, or were those old multiplayer demos really just demos of a larger product? Those games don't have as much to test. Titanfall, with it being built on this kind of automatic, dedicated server infrastructure, like, they had to test that stuff because it could all crumble. With UT, the thing they had to test, the only thing they had to make sure that stayed up was the master server, so you could get a list of servers running the game. Everyone could just run their own server, so there's no real, there's nothing to really test at that point except weapon balance and all that other stuff. And, maybe, if those came out before the game came out and they noticed some things they did wrong, maybe they would make some changes, but, it's not necessarily a beta. And really, when you think about what beta tends to really mean, a beta should be the full product, just not in a finished state. Like a kind of content-locked, finished thing, not a subsection, not here's 2 maps. Like, that's no longer a beta, really. But that's the way the word is used. It doesn't really matter. Also, the Titanfall thing, I think the implication with betas is that they go away when the game comes out. If you want to talk about the real difference, like demos, I think, largely the expectation of a demo is that it's always going to be there because it's an advertisement for you to buy the full game. Whereas a beta is just sort of like, here's a little taste and it's going away. You cannot play it anymore. So I think that's been kind of the main difference, but it's really, it's semantics. You're right to be confused by it to some extent, but ultimately it doesn't really matter that much. But also, demos have kind of fallen out of favor, Microsoft's not requiring demos for their downloadable games anymore. And I think that they're doing that because I think the numbers kind of show that the betas don't, or the demos don't actually serve a purpose. Or people don't take advantage of them in the numbers that made sense for the work that had to be done to make a demo version and all that sort of stuff. So, demos kind of fell by the wayside. People just aren't interested in them in the quantities that they would need to be for it to be effective at selling a game or something. So, here's one that's anonymous. I don't know why this one's anonymous, but how do you see the role of publishers changing? On the latest podcast, April 15th, Drew was talking about the new Stronghold and mentioned that the developers were excited about self-publishing, which let them basically ship it when they felt it was ready. The implication being that publishers are typically knocking on doors looking for a return on their investment, which is what led to the previous game being undercooked. If this works out well for those guys, I can't imagine why they'd go back to a traditional publisher. Historically, when someone asked what the role of a publisher was, the answer would typically be something along the lines of they pay for QA and marketing and some other things. But with self-publishing on consoles and early access on Steam gaining such momentum, it feels like it's getting harder for a publisher to justify taking a slice of revenue and ownership of the IP when a developer can look around and see several of their peers getting along just fine on their own. So do you think this will have a meaningful impact on publishers at all over the next several years? Do you think there will be a trend of mid-sized studios putting up their own cash to fund a self-published game in order to launch them into a self-publishing cycle, just like what the Stronghold guys are doing? Why wouldn't they at least try? You're right. And with a game like Stronghold, I mean, that's not a game that necessarily needs a ton of marketing because it is appealing to such a specific crowd that is probably seeking that sort of thing out. And that's been one of the larger changes, too, is, if you think about the PR and marketing that a publisher can provide, they provide it in a mainstream way that is really only going to work for mainstream games. And Stronghold would benefit from, maybe a little bit, it would benefit from sales, but would those people... if they were advertising Stronghold on wrestling, like they were with Titanfall, do you think that people would pick it up and be excited by it, or would they pick it up and go like, this is fucking way over my head, I can't understand this, how do I shoot? Like it or not, like the mainstream audience kind of isn't necessarily interested in complicated games these days. It's not to say that games that are not complicated are bad. It's just that that's kind of how things have shaken out. Or that's become the conventional wisdom. I mean, maybe we don't give the audience enough credit to be able to pick up stuff. Because, you think about when games were a lot smaller years and years ago, everyone played everything because there weren't that many games out. You're just trying to play as much as possible because you like games. So, that would be playing a ton of role-playing games and a ton of strategy games, like, turn-based strategy, real-time strategy, mostly real-time strategy. At the time I was kind of getting into PC, like Warcraft was coming out, Doom 2 was big, Doom 2, Doom 2 so good. So in that sense, like, what can a publisher do for Stronghold? Like, maybe offer some QA and some other stuff. But there are more outsourcing companies that can handle QA. You can get a small PR firm to expose your game to the people that will be likely to write about it, the people that will be likely to cover your game and let other people know that it exists, and go it alone. But that costs money. If you don't have that money already, then yes, you have to go make a deal with someone to get that money. Whether that's a publisher or an investor or something like that, like, who knows? But yeah, I think especially on the PC, but increasingly on consoles, we're going to see a real shift away from publishers. Publishers are really only going to come in handy when it comes to pressing discs, and that's not even that difficult in the grand scheme of things. The bigger games, the bigger $60 games, are still going to need more marketing support, and more PR support, and stuff like that, because they can spend so much money have to get the word out as much as possible to try to recoup their costs. But yeah, I think self-publishing is going to is definitely going to matter more and more. Think about just how things have changed on Xbox Live Arcade, where you used to have to partner with a publisher to get a slot on the service, and the only people who got slots on the service were people that were shipping retail games in a lot of cases. It was just like a really fucked up situation, and now that's gone. So you would have developers that were partnering with publishers strictly to get a slot, strictly to get out there. They didn't need the promotion, they didn't need the help making their game, they just needed a slot. And with that out of the way, that's a huge thing for consoles just in general. Sony doesn't have that system in place, and they let people self-publish, and Microsoft has its own kind of self-publishing thing too. And you're going to see more and more of that, just kind of cutting those people out of the loop, especially for games that are appealing to people that like games already, people that like games enough to follow games and know when a game is coming out, and tell their friends about a game and listen to friends about a game, and have word spread that way. But yeah, those bigger games are still going to need that mass market. They're still going to need all that awareness to happen. Like that stuff still has to occur. And whether that happens on television with ads, or if it's just like, oh, well, our publisher bought us a slot on the Xbox dashboard, so people will know that our game is out tomorrow. Like there are a lot of different things like that. Or Microsoft stepping in to do a bunch of like, oh, we're going to pledge X number of millions of dollars in co-marketing if you give us this exclusive mission or whatever, which is usually, I think, how most of those deals work. Putting 60 minutes of exclusive missions only on the PS4 and all that sort of stuff. That's Sony going out and buying ads on television that promote that game, or types of co-marketing, or doing it on their dashboard, or doing that sort of stuff. So we'll see those fights kind of continue, because it's in Microsoft and Sony's best interest to jockey for that stuff, just because they want to sell consoles. I think that the landscape's changed, and it already has changed. It'll continue to change, and we'll see what it means for the mid-tier publisher, or the what's now a mid-tier publisher or something like that. You do still have to have some independent developers out there that are partnering with publishers, because you have stuff like Midnight City, where like Majesco has started its like indie division, and they've gone out and signed publishing deals. You've got like Devolver Digital that's doing some similar type stuff, where if you have a developer with a cool idea, but they just can't get the money together, and they're not really going to go to Kickstarter, or maybe they already went to Kickstarter, and they've got a cool small idea that could be a much cooler medium-sized idea if they got some cash and some time. Then stuff like Midnight City and stuff like that maybe starts to make sense. But point being, like, every developer is in a different financial situation. So yes, the best case is you don't want to split your money with anyone if you don't have to, so you want to self-publish. But if you don't have that money, then there's Devolver, there's Midnight City, there's other funds and other stuff out there that you can get into, and those still will serve some sort of purpose. Yeah. Let's see here. Zico says, in the state they're in currently, Japanese RPGs are a pretty niche genre. And even its most popular series, like Persona, will generally only appeal to a fairly select group of people. In the last generation, we saw a lot of developers like Square struggle to adapt. Going into the next generation, what do you think Japanese RPGs can do to regain their popularity in the West? Games change. That's not really a realistic goal for a genre anymore. You could have a breakthrough game. You could have a game that ends up widely appealing to more people, and maybe that has some knock-on effect and makes the genre a little more popular. But it's not like gaming is diversified. It's not necessarily that Japanese role-playing games have become significantly less popular. I mean, they have. They've kind of fallen out of the public eye a little bit, but that was really just Final Fantasy VII. And that got that kind of mainstream weird Pepsi push or something. And then, there were people that got into the genre with that game and stuck with it, and, some of them have faded away. But it's not about that anymore. It's, like I said, gaming has kind of diversified. Those fans still exist, and there are people that like that genre kind of for what it is. And at some point, like, are you sacrificing too much if you are trying to appeal to the mainstream while still trying to stay true to the genre's roots? there was a statement from Square after Bravely Default did really well, where they were like, oh, we were trying to develop games for a worldwide audience, and they were all shit, and then Bravely Default did really well, and maybe we should just stop trying to appeal to everybody, because that makes it so it appeals to no one. So that's probably what they need to do, is just double down on what they are, and don't try to be, don't try to forsake the game just to try to appeal to more people. Like, that doesn't work. It's not to say you can't come up with innovative new crossovers and stuff like that. The roots of a Japanese RPG wrapped in a competitive first-person shooter, some fucking batshit thing like that. Someone could try it, but that's not the same thing anymore. That's a kind of a different pitch. But yeah, I feel like even first-person shooters are still huge, right? MOBAs, a couple of MOBAs are really big. And those will kind of fall by the wayside to some extent. And you kind of see that with first-person shooters these days. It's just not doing it like it used to. It's not to say that they are unpopular. They're probably still the big mainstream genre right now. But people are looking for something different, and they'll spread out and find it. And I think that's a good thing. I don't know. There's a lot of different stuff out there for a lot of different people. Hiver says, when you fly into Las Vegas and rent a car, which why would you rent a car in Vegas? That's a horrible idea. You'll drive past a Konami building on your way to the Strip, especially if you're going to the Strip. Like, why rent a car? I mean, unless you're driving out the desert to hide a body. They have taxis. Unless you're going somewhere weird, you don't need a car. It never occurred to me that there might be some overlap between video games and gambling. How much of a connection is there? Do slot machine companies have a presence at GDC or DICE? Do developers drift between gaming and gaming? So yes, they do. That's they don't really have a presence at video game shows, like the gaming industry, meaning like slot machines and stuff like that. But yeah, there's definitely some crossover. Some game designers and stuff like that go do stuff like that. I know, what was it, like a bunch of Midway people, when Midway shut down, they went to like WMS, which I think at one point was related to Midway and Williams and all that other stuff, but they are like WMS Gaming, I think is the name of the company now, and they do slot machines. So I'm going to look this up real quick. Yeah, WMS Gaming. WMS.com? No. Yeah. Introducing Blade Stepper, a pure gambling experience. Like Goldfish 3, bonus wheel, and a new reel. That stuff's crazy. So some talent does go back and forth, programmers and stuff like that, designers will get into slot machine development, and it sounds, everyone I talk to that's still in video games that knows people that cross over to that, just says like, oh, it sounds like the most soulless thing in the world, but they're making a fuckload of money. So it's one of those things where, like, even more than like mobile games and social games, like the people that get into slot machine stuff just apparently fucking make a ton of money. But it is like this soul-crushing job if you care about video games, I guess. But maybe that's just what the people in video games are saying, because they are not making a fuck ton of money like their colleagues that have jumped over into slot machines. We don't really get exposed to that. It doesn't show up at DICE. It's not part of the video game industry, so it doesn't really show up at E3 or anything like that. But that industry is huge, and there's definitely some crossover between those two industries. Fro Bro with zeros says, I wasn't around during the video game market crash of the 80s, but from what I know, it occurred due to too much crap being out on the market and flooding the interest of games out of people's minds. With the rise of independent development, do you see a possibility of another industry collapse due to a large volume of games being released without the need of a publisher or the Nintendo seal of quality that provided at least some sort of obstacle to ensure that other shit wasn't being shipped to stores? Will the ease of publishing to an online store that Valve and Sony are promising ultimately have a negative effect on sales? You can argue that this has already become a factor with the Apple App Store, that can rip off games in the top charts and Steam top sellers filled with early access software. No. So what really matters now that we've kind of moved to this like online store, this app store model, the Steam store and stuff like that, it doesn't matter that those things exist. It's just how well are those storefronts curated for people who like quality video games, and can they get to what they're looking for without accidentally buying shit. And you could see a case where, on iOS or something, you get people that might get burned by buying a bunch of rip-off garbage and go like, you know what, I'm not buying any more games for this thing, and be done with it. But you could argue that those people were they're not very into video games to begin with. When the video game crash happened, video games didn't go away. The mainstream audience went away from it. The fad part of it was over. Pac-Man fever, you weren't the cartoons based on video games and Pac-Man sponsoring Pizza Hut, or like whatever cross promotion stuff, like that's the stuff that went away. And with it, arcades dried up, and with it, the console market dried up, because the Atari 2600 was old at that point, and or getting old. And the kind of fickle mainstream casual video game player eventually became bored with it and moved on. It was not unlike what we saw with the Wii, where at some point they just stopped buying Wii games, and the Wii shriveled up. Like the Wii market just went whoop, like immediately, to where like the third parties couldn't make money there anymore, because the rubes weren't out there buying Wii games anymore. And that's sort of what happened on the 2600 and some of the other platforms of the time. And people kind of got burned out on it and stopped going to arcades, and all of that stuff sort of changed. But gaming didn't go away. If you truly cared about video games, you found video games. Games were still being released to arcades. The arcades were a little smaller. Some of them were closing down, some were moving, stuff like that. But there were still arcade games coming out. It's when all the 4-player kind of quarter-sucking stuff started happening, like the Konami beat-em-ups, which I view through in an entirely different light now. Like, those were just like fun, short games or whatever. I didn't really think too much of them. I didn't love them. But after hearing Mark Cerny talk about that era and hearing Eugene Jarvis talk about some of that stuff, and Mark Turmel, like coming out of DICE, when they were talking about, oh, Defender, it's 37 seconds, and then you got to put another quarter in. Like, those guys are businessmen, and it's scary because you think about them like, oh, these design geniuses, they did all this awesome work. It's like, no, they're trying to get quarters from you. And hearing Mark Cerny talk about that era as like, as soon as, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Gauntlet and some of that stuff where you just keep dumping quarters into it to continue, and these big 4-player games that could have 4 people dumping quarters in at once instead of just one. That was designed from a revenue angle, not from like isn't this a cool video game? Like, they were just trying to get more money out of people. So now all those beat-em-ups, all that stuff from that era, all those Konami games, I just look at it and go, ugh, they feel dirty now that I kind of have that perspective on it, I guess. But yeah, video games didn't go away. If you truly cared about video games, you found them. And the thing that happened at that point was, as those consoles dried up, the computers got bigger. The computers mattered more. The Commodore 64, was very huge in Europe, and had its share of fans in the U.S. as well. I had one, but that's pretty much where I went. I ended up going over to the Commodore 64, going over